Welcome to the Trade Finance session. It's my pleasure to introduce your moderator today, Patty Brewer from the Small Business Administration Office of International Trade. Take it away, Patty, and we'll stop the screen share and spotlight you guys.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. Hello and welcome to the Women's Funding Summit panel discussing SBA's trade financing. I'm Patty Brewer and I'm an export finance manager with the Small Business Administration's Office of International Trade. I appreciate you being here with us today. So if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A and we'll ask our amazing panelists. So let's get started. Women-owned businesses face unequal challenges when securing business financing. American Express reported that in 2019, there were nearly 13 million women-owned businesses in the US, and they generated almost $2 trillion in revenue. And when we look at the companies that are exporting nationwide in 2019, about 13% of exporters were women-owned. And studies show that when a woman-owned business exports, revenues are higher and you hire more people. However, in the world of international trade, women-owned businesses are underrepresented. So our main question this morning is, how do we request bank financing to help us take advantage of growth opportunities for our companies? To help us answer this question, let me introduce our awesome panel. First is Sheila Jaszlics. She's the president of Pathfinder Systems Incorporated, located in Lakewood, Colorado. The company was established in 1985 and serves the military training and simulation market for the United States and its NATO partners. Pathfinder Systems also specializes in the performance of research projects for various government agencies. Our second panelist is Robin Dode. Robin is a senior SBA lender and vice president with Banner Bank in Seattle, Washington. Robin has spent the past 30 years helping small business clients reach their goals and objectives by providing capital for growth in the markets Banner Bank serves. She has been an SBA lender for the past 7 years and has helped many SBA clients acquire businesses and franchises, assisted business partners buying out other partners. She's financed business startups and growth into international markets via the SBA's export products. Sheila, Robin, welcome, and thank you for sharing your expertise. So Sheila, let's start with you first. You started your company in 1985. At what point did you realize that you were ready to request bank financing?
Well, around 2010, we decided to go into the international marketplace. And we actually won a solicitation to build a large high fidelity simulator system for the Royal Netherlands Air Force. It was our first international sale, and we ended up with all kinds of unanticipated requirements for capital. One of the very basic one was that, unlike US government contracts, when you do a contract with, say, a country like the Netherlands, you don't get progress or partial payments typically. So we had to be able to finance the work. We also had to get a bond or bank guarantee to do the work, so that required additional capital. Finally, because it was written so that the contract was in an international currency, the euro, we also had to enter into currency hedge contracts so that we could protect the bank and ourselves in case there was any currency fluctuation. So we entered into a whole different world of finance when we started an international job.
And that truly is a new world. We're talking bank hedging, we're talking foreign currency. It really did take you in a different direction. So Robin, I'll ask you the same question, but on a different, from your vantage point. When a company comes to you and they're talking about these complicated issues of foreign currency and foreign buyers, what do you look at and how do you guide a company through export financing?
Well, first off, one of the things I like to mention up front is anybody that I sit down with to meet, I always ask if they're exporting their products. 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. And then if I probe a little bit further, because I'm in the Seattle market, they'll say, well, we sell to Canada. So it's good to know that Canada and Mexico are exports. And the other thing that comes up a lot is if they're not direct exporters, I also like to ask about their clients. And if their clients are exporting, they too can qualify for these SBA export products, which are just a great way to fund a new business, a growing business, all the way around.
Perfect. So back to you, Sheila, when you went in to talk to your lender about financing this new Netherlands contract, did you know what you were getting yourself into? Did you know SBA's export finance programs were available?
No, I didn't. And basically what happened is that I thought that this would be something that all banks can handle. And it turned out that the primary bank that I used at that time had no international experience. So I had to quickly go and find another bank. And that's where the SBA was absolutely invaluable. The SBA was able to come to me with a number of banks that could handle the amount of capital that I would need because they already knew what that was, and who also had international experience, and most importantly for me at the time, that I could have a US dollar account and I could also have a euro account. So that because my contract was written in euros. So I wanted to have both accounts in one financial institution, and the SBA was very helpful in helping us find that.
So Robin, back to you. When a company comes to you requesting export financing, what kind of timeline do you look at? Do you want them to come in a few months before they need the financing, or how do you work that timing?
Oh gosh, a few months before would be fantastic. Typically people come for financing like 2 weeks after they've noticed that they need it. So I absolutely love it to start working with somebody, you know, months before they know they're going to need financing. And in general, I think it depends on the type of business that we're talking about. You know, will the loan fund long-term growth or short-term growth? But generally speaking, I'd say at least 6 months. Strategically, I think it makes sense for a business to have both a long range strategic plan and then an annual like tactical plan, the steps that you're going to take to get you in the course of 3 years to where you want to be. And among those, it's good to have a budget, an annual budget, and especially an annual cash forecast budget. It's that annual cash flow forecast that kind of immediately shows customers, borrowers, where and when they're going to need to borrow. So if you see that's going to happen, let's say it's today, October, you know it's going to happen in April, I would get together with your banker now, share the cash flow forecast and talk about, you know, here's where we're going to need to borrow, and here's why we're going to need to borrow. And then the banker will help you structure the right loan that fits your need. And in this case, we're talking about SBA export loans. There's a couple of different ones to choose from. And so they would help steer you in the right direction in terms of the correct SBA program, whether it's long-term financing or shorter-term financing. But I think, yeah, I think definitely having a 12-month plan and then a 3-year long range plan, especially if like a year from now, you're planning to make a major capital investment of some sort. Those are good to talk to your banker about well before the need to borrow actually occurs.
So Sheila, I think that's a great answer, and it really does emphasize what you're going to be looking at whenever you see the borrowing proposal or the request from a borrower. Sheila, when you're putting together your funding request or your business plan, What sections of it gave you some challenges, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, we didn't have what I would call a typical business plan. This was capital for a very specific project. We were going to build a very large simulator in the Netherlands. So it was really a very detailed technical proposal. With that, we had a schedule, an integrated master schedule. And from that, we could figure out we had to figure out in advance our cash requirements in terms of just performing the contract. But one of the things that we ran into, things that were difficult for us to get our hands around sometimes, was determining your actual capital needs. Sometimes is not so easy when you're going into a new marketplace. We'd been in business long enough to know that with a complex project, that we would inevitably run into some challenges. So the question became, how much additional capital will we need to form kind of a risk pool, so that if we had something that was unanticipated, we could still successfully and profitably perform the contract? That became something that was a little bit difficult to get our hands around. We were lucky in the fact that the government of the Netherlands, unlike US government contracting, actually allowed us to address risk as a line item in our technical proposal. So that was a real relief to us. We didn't get as much money for risk. We didn't negotiate as big of a pool for challenging areas as we would have liked, but it was something that we could actually discuss with the customer. So I would say if somebody is going to go do some work overseas, I would definitely bring that up. I would always discuss risk, because it really helped in the overall negotiations for the contract, because we both understood where we were coming from, the customer and our company. Understanding tax and duty liabilities is another one. If you haven't gone into international markets, that can be, depending upon the country, that can be quite dicey. There are all kinds of hidden taxes and duties. So you really need to do the research to make sure that you have adequately priced those kinds of things. And the final thing is to just know if there are any regulations that might impact your effort. In our case, because we were selling a simulator to the Royal Netherlands Air Force, and this began many months before we started the work, we knew that we had to register with the State Department and that we would have to put together an export license, which is an additional expense that when I originally wrote the technical proposal, it was not in there. So those are the kinds of things we ran into.
So Robin, I'll toss it back to you. When you have companies coming in and they've got these different challenges, they may be maybe facing a new export buyer, or they might be facing some of the challenges we had recently with the supply chain or with increasing costs. How do you guide a company through these very challenging questions?
Well, thanks for asking that. I think the key to the relationship with the banker is probably to stay in touch and seek advice. Most of us are what I would say is like a free consultant, that if you're open to hearing how perhaps, in confidential, not using names, how other companies we've worked with have survived some of these difficult periods, such as rising prices and supply chains that can't deliver on time. But I love to hear from clients who share what's going on, and open communication during difficult times helps me help you. In the same way as planning to apply for a loan, I think approaching the bank when you know things are getting a little bit dicey is, good to do right away, because it helps me, advocate for you within the bank and try to, come up with maybe a deferred payment plan or other ideas that might help get through these really rough periods. And then I have outside resources that I often refer people to during these challenging times. The small business development centers and SCORE, which are both mentorship type programs that offer consulting for free. And many times they're associated with your local community college. And these people have been in your shoes as the entrepreneur. And so typically have pretty solid advice and other resources that you can tap into through that organization. Thanks.
So when we talk about SBA financing, we've talked, there was an earlier session that mentioned SBA 7A program. And when we are talking about SBA's export finance programs, there are 3 programs to consider for your company. There's the Export Express, which is typically the smallest of the 3 loan programs. And it's designed in a way for companies that are either new to exporting or pivoting to a new market. And then you have the International Trade Loan and the Export Working Capital Loan. And those are really designed for companies that probably have an established book of business or they've got experience in the marketplace. And those are larger loans. One is, of course, a working capital loan. The other can be a term loan. So the way you're going to use the funds, if you're going to set up a working capital line or if you're going to purchase fixed assets, that will dictate which kind of financing you look for and what those terms will look like. So Sheila, I'll toss it back to you. When you were looking at these international sales, what other kinds of mitigants did you put in place to kind of protect you from the risk of the international market?
Well, I think one of the best things that we did is that we had an in-country representative in the Netherlands. And the great thing about that is that can greatly reduce your risk in terms of your ability to successfully perform the contract. And you can address in-country challenges right away so that you don't look like just a face across the ocean, right? You've got somebody there that your customer can talk to. Also, our representative was a native Dutch speaker, so he also understood all the cultural issues. There are a lot of similarities between the Dutch and the Americans, but there are also a lot of differences in terms of how we do business and how we understand each other. So it was always good to have a real-time interpreter so that we could both understand each other. After that, the currency hedge becomes very important, both for our company, Pathfinder, but also for the bank, so that we aren't, those have to be put in place. I think it's part of the export loan package where those have to be put in place before the loan is signed. It's part and parcel of what you have to do. Insurance to cover the product that you are producing. And also, most importantly, in our case, shipping insurance. And I'm sure today with the problems in the supply chain, shipping insurance, especially if you're in a tight schedule, is going to be key to what you need to do. We use contacts in the State Department and the Department of Commerce pretty regularly because after we built the simulator, we still maintain it. And we do upgrades on the simulator. So we're able to kind of keep a pulse on what's happening in the country of the Netherlands so that we can not only respond appropriately to things that happen to us now, but also plan for the future. So that's very good. And then kind of alluding back to what I had said before is when we did our pricing, is to have a little bit, I don't want to call it a slush fund because that's not what it is, but to have some leeway so that you can address risk, you can address challenges, because you can't look when you put together your package, you can't look at life through rosy glasses. There will be something that you never thought of. When it happens to you, you will think, oh, I should have seen that, right? Why didn't I think of that? But the point is that there are a lot of why didn't I think of that, right? There are a lot of those. So you need to have an ability to, it doesn't need to be huge, but you need to have a little change in your pocket so you can handle those kinds of things.
It's really good advice. Very good advice. So we'll hand it back to you, Robin. How do you advise your companies that are exporting how to manage their international risk?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think probably most banks, larger banks, have dedicated international departments. And we're very fortunate at Banner Bank to also have a dedicated team of international trade finance specialists. So while I coordinate the loan portion of helping support trade finance, we have experts that come in and look at the contracts customers are contemplating. And then, as Sheila was mentioning, some of those risks are then mitigated by that part of the team, but they include things such as letters of credit. You can have your customer, excuse me, your customer's bank guarantee their payment, and they do that by the issuance of a letter of credit that would then come to Banner Bank, and we would then advise you that, okay, we have these documents, everything looks in order, ship, and the payment would then come back to the bank. And so you're not working directly with your client overseas. You would have the bank kind of managing the payment process. That can also be done through documentary collections. And then there's a couple of other, as Sheila mentioned, the what we call hedging contract. Selling in a currency other than US dollars could open up a lot of potential for our US companies. And if you would choose to pursue something like that, we do help the borrowers get into those contracts that then, you will get paid in a foreign currency, but you've already locked in what that will convert to US dollars at. And then one of the last things is standby letters of credit, which aren't that common, I think, on the export side, but those are available if you should be required to post some kind of bond or security in order to be an exporter to a certain customer or something. The standby letter of credit acts as a guarantee for those funds. And I think I've gotten through pretty much most of the international trade products that we have at Banner Bank. But suffice to say, even if when I'm meeting with the company to go over the SBA loan portion of an exporting transaction, there are experts that will guide you through everything you need to know on that front. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you, Robin. That's really good advice. And it covers a wide breadth of different tools that are available to exporters when they're looking at the international market. And one other tool to consider that may help you mitigate some risk is trade credit on your foreign accounts receivables. And, there are lots of commercial entities that work with that. Exim Bank also offers trade credit insurance. But what that helps you do is in the event that your buyer does not pay you, your account receivable is still insured, so you do get paid a large portion of that account receivable. So when you're looking at international trade, you've got lots of tools at your disposal. You've got the different programs the SBA has. You've got the different programs internationally. You've got the letters of credit. You've got the documentary. You've got a very well-informed group of bankers who can help you as well. Sheila, you mentioned having worked with the U.S. Commercial Service when you were looking at your international trade. How did they help you prepare for your international sales?
Well, the role they played there was that they really helped me understand what the taxes and duties were that I would be dealing with. They were also instrumental when we were delivering equipment, and when we delivered the original simulator, which was quite large, and also when we deliver upgrades, they can help sort of smooth the way at the ports so that we can get our products out quickly and get them to the installation site. So we found them to be very helpful there. The other thing I found that they've done is that if we're looking for new business, they can often, because they have representatives in country, they can kind of tell us if there's an international solicitation that we're interested in. They can kind of give us the lay of the land and help us determine if we're actually going to write a proposal, or if we feel like, this particular solicitation is probably most likely going to go in country. They also help us they helped us understand things such as offsets. Some countries, if you have a pretty large contract, they're going to look for a portion of the work that you're going to provide to be done in country by individuals and companies that are in country. So they can help you find those companies and those individuals if that becomes a requirement. So those are the kinds of things that we found the commercial service to do very well.
And to add to that, there's a whole network of support out there for companies that are exporting. Robin brought up earlier the small business development centers, SCORE, you've got the women's resource centers, the veterans business outreach centers, and then you've got the commercial service. And in most states, you also have the STEP program, which is a grant for small business exporters, and it helps them to offset some of their international marketing costs. It's administered by your specific state. So the rules in terms of eligibility and STEP grant awards are specific to the state that you live in or that your operations are out of. Robin, I'll ask you this question popped up in the chat that talked about the SBA's requirement for a personal guarantee. They're asking advice. Did you want to address that?
Sure, just a bit of clarity that the SBA does require personal guarantees, as do banks, from anybody who's going to own a minimum of 25% of business. And so it's very common. Commercial banks require personal guarantees. Now, if your company is diverse with many different investors that have, 10%, 8%, 16%, we're not going to require personal guarantees from all of those investor folks. It would be focused on who's running the company. And again, anybody with ownership interest in excess of 25%. But the SBA only has one case where personal guarantees aren't required. And those are the loans for ESOPs, which are, the company stock ownership plans. Other than that, it's a requirement. I hope that answered the question.
So thanks, that's very helpful. And I guess one of the reasons why the guarantees are required is because these are government guaranteed loans. So one of the things that we need to make sure about is that you have as much stake in your company's loan as the taxpayers who are providing the federal guarantee. So Sheila, I'm going to go back to you real quick and talk about an item that I know is very close to your heart, and that's how cybersecurity affected your operation for your company.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you'll find is that we all know that cyber threats are growing every day. I mean, it used to be an unusual thing, but now it's in the news every day. But I think when you get into any kind of international business where you've got where you've got many financial transactions that are international in nature, you are at much more risk. So where cybersecurity plays in is that most, if you're going to do work with a foreign government, you will most likely have cybersecurity requirements. For us, because we also do work for the US government, there are now cybersecurity standards in place that we must meet. But I would say regardless of what kind of international work you're going to do, it's very important that you have methods that are in place that can protect your electronic financial transactions and all your data. It's something that you can no longer ignore. You need to have security practices for all your employees. I know it might seem daunting, but in today's environment, these practices are vital to protect your financial health. Scammers are getting really, really sophisticated. And if you don't have good practices in terms of how you handle, especially financial transactions between your bank, between your employees, between yourself, you open yourself up for compromise. As a minimum, I think going forward, you have to have your own multi-factor authentication capability for to access your email, and certainly for all of your financial transactions. And I would probably, if you do any level of business at all, I would recommend an outside quarterly or at least annual review, looking to have whoever does your IT, I mean, it could be internal, to just look at your network activity and look and see if you've been compromised. You may not have just because you're compromised doesn't mean that you've got money flowing out, right? You might not, or data, you might not notice it at first. So to regularly watch your network traffic is really vital. And also, I'm finding now in US contracts, but also in contracts that we're currently pursuing in other NATO countries, is that you have to have, and for banks also, you have to have cyber insurance. And no one is going to grant you cyber insurance unless you at least have multi-factor authentication. So it's something that we had one breach, but it worked out okay, but it was very scary. All I can say was that it was caught in time, and it was for a big number. But I don't think it really hits home until it actually hits you. And even at that time, we had several processes in place, but it wasn't enough quite to stop it. So you also have to have training. So let people always look at your email. A hacker wants to know that they're going to give you an email that looks legitimate. So always look at that URL. I mean, I think today everybody knows that, but at the time it happened to us, it just wasn't in the forefront of our mind. So cyber security is a big deal.
Words from the heart. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Do this. This is your mother speaking. Do this.
So I'll shift over to the Q&A. There was a question about trade agreements on the Caribbean and with the Caribbean and Jamaica. And I'm not an expert on any of the trade agreements by far. Robin, Sheila, do you guys have any expertise on that? Yes or no?
I do not.
So I'll ask the person who asked the question, leave me your email address. So within the Office of International Trade, we have a trade policy group, and that group specializes on the trade agreements that the U.S. is a party to, and they can answer specific questions on any trade agreements. And you might have seen Christine Brown earlier during the keynote speakers She was posting some information about various opportunities for women-owned businesses. But if you leave me your email address, I'll get you in contact with Christine Brown of our trade policy group, and she can answer your questions on those trade agreements with the Caribbean and Jamaican countries. I believe there was another question that asked about banks of the West Coast that have experience with irrevocable confirmed payable at site letters of credit. So, well, Robin's bank, Banner Bank, is on the West Coast. Robin, how far does Banner Bank go in terms of geography?
We are all along the West Coast, from Washington, Oregon, California, and then Idaho. Those are the offices that we have.
Okay, great. And so again, if the person who asked that particular question can leave me your email address, I can pull up other banks along the West Coast who also are involved in international trade with the SBA's export finance programs. So you've got Banner Bank, and then I can provide you a separate list. So let's see.
Yes, we'd love to talk to you. That would be fantastic.
All right, so there's another question. If we were to get the SBA Export Express loan, are we able to use those funds for cybersecurity? That's a really good question. So the Export Express loan is, you can set it up in two ways. You can set it up either as a term loan to purchase fixed assets like equipment or real estate, or you can set it up as a line of credit to cover various expenses that support your international trade. So if your cybersecurity insurance is one of those expenses that supports your international trade, I believe it would be an eligible expense to fall under the Export Express. Robin, did you have an opinion on whether or not the cybersecurity insurance would be eligible for coverage under the Export Express?
Yes, I think just the same line of thinking that you had, Patty, that if it relates to, you know, how Sheila was saying that it was a necessary component of the export sales that her company is doing, it certainly seems to make sense that it would be an allowable expense.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So what kinds of expenses are eligible under your export financing? And again, we go back to the original statement that if you have a need to purchase equipment or say you're purchasing warehouse space, or you need to revamp a shop with some updated equipment, that's all term financing, and that could fall under either the international trade loan or the Export Express, depending on how much you need. If you are looking for more working capital, then you would be looking at, again, the Export Express loan or an export working capital program under the SBA. But we're not the only game in town. We've also got Ex-Im Bank. They've got a working capital program as well. So if you're not eligible for SBA's financing, you might be eligible under Ex-Im Bank. And so it's very much worth giving us a call, either calling Robin at Banner Bank or one of her colleagues, or giving me a call or one of my great colleagues. So I've got 20 colleagues around the country who can answer these questions about whether or not a transaction or an expense is eligible under the SBA's export financing. And I've just put the link to all my colleagues' information into the chat. And so, yeah, if you have other questions about whether or not your company is eligible for export financing, or whether particular costs are eligible, certainly reach out to any of us. We're happy to answer. Our time is almost up, and I just want to go back to our awesome panelists and say, Sheila and Robin, is there one last piece of advice you would give to a business owner looking at international trade?
Well, for me, I think one of the questions we touched on just a while ago was about, putting together the business plan. And certainly if the goal is to apply for SBA export loan guarantee programs, we would want to see the export plan incorporated into the overall business plan. And as far as that goes, I just, you know, I've been asked before, you know, what sections of a business plan do you focus on and things of that nature. And, you know, unlike many of my colleagues, I tend to focus on the soft aspects. I like to look at the financial forecasts and things of that sort. But I really want to know, why are you doing this? What is the passion behind doing this? Because from somebody who's worked for somebody else for so long, going out on your own seems like a big risk. And I just admire people so much who are willing to do that. And I love seeing in the business plan what motivates that. And as far as, you know, strictly the export financing, as I said, we've got a great group of folks here at Banner Bank that would love to help anybody. And I think that's about it, Patty. It's been great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Robin. Sheila, did you have any nuggets you wanted to share?
I think the only thing I would share is to really network with people that have done similar export kinds of activities, because they're usually happy to tell you what to do and what not to do. And then always have a skeptic in your company, right? Always have somebody that's like you would think, and you can hear it all through all the conversations today. Have somebody that's kind of doing some additional oversight, some additional thinking, so that you can make sure you don't miss many things. So I would say that. And the final thing would be really understand those regulations of paperwork, because they might be more brutal than what you think. So always understand the bureaucratic side of getting an export through.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That is such great information. Sheila, Robin, you guys are fabulous. I've learned a great deal, and I want to thank you, the webinar participants, for your interest in SBA's trade finance. Zara, I'll hand it over to you.
So great. Thank you so much. And I just want to highlight, I love how Robin said, we're free consultants. Very true. And take advantage of that. Contact your local Patty. The link is on the chat box. Contact Robin or Kristen, her colleague, and it's also in the chat box, or contact your current bank. It doesn't cost to ask questions, and in the end, it will really help you. So again, thank you for all of our panelists, our speakers, for a great breakout session. I'm going to pop forward now. All right, so